It's definitely a roller coaster journey every single day. Even till today, it still happens. You wake up, you go about your business, and some points it just hits you and you're like, this will never work. Why am I spending so much time on this? But then seconds later, you're also on top of the world again and you think, look, I've got this sorted. This will be the next big thing.
Rob, so I wanted to get you on the pod, right? Because I think I've known you for about 9 to 10 years. I think we both moved to Singapore around the same time, right? 2015. And since then, I think we've both gone on such an extensive, long journey. But we've also changed in a number of ways as well. Like gone from when we were getting pissed at C'est La Vie and Bang Bang every weekend and then TBC on a Sunday to now running our own businesses, man, which is fucking amazing. And obviously very proud of you for the growth that you've had in that and how you've gone on that journey through the ups and downs and the highs and lows, mate. So I wanted to get you in the pod to share some of that, but also I think from a one-to-one perspective, how I've seen you as a friend also change as well. Like, continue to be creative, continue to follow your gut instinct, you like self-developing and self-regulating yourself, and just following things through, man. So how's it been going with Goro, and just give us a bit of insight on that?
It's been an absolute wild roller coaster journey. We're about a year and a half into the business now. And it's only been in the last few months, I would say, that I've kind of realized that Goro is no longer kind of a fun project. Kind of the first year, you're really figuring stuff out whether is there really a demand for the product in the market? Does your tech actually can it scale? But we're now at a point where we have tens of thousands of happy users. It grows at hundreds a day. It's becoming a really serious business now. So that also impacts hiring, of course. We have to get more senior people on the team. So it's super exciting, the journey we've had. Doesn't mean it's necessarily easy. On the outside world, it looks easy. It looks like, oh, you guys got so lucky, a lot of success in a short space of time. You managed to raise some money, but a lot of hard work that goes into it in the background.
Yeah, no, man, I can imagine. I remember the days where I used to see you. I was coming back from nights out, and you'd be coming down the lift. We lived in the same condo. And it was like 12 a.m. I'm like, Rob, like, what are you doing here? Why weren't you out tonight? And you're like, yeah, I've been downloading data from Airbnb to see what's been going on in the market in Bali. I was like, all right, mate. So you're coming out now. You're like, no, I'm going to go walk around and think about this. I was like, all right, then. So yeah, how did Goro come around? You know, what is it exactly? Give us some insight on the project. Well, not project anymore.
It all started about 7-8 years ago. I'd gone on a trip living in Singapore. You go on a boys' trip to Bali, and I'd booked a place for my friends. And just being quite a curious person, I was wondering how much it was to buy a property like this, because I knew how much I was paying for the rent per night. So I was wondering how much it was to buy, and then you do a quick sum of how much you think you can rent it for per night times the number of nights. And it's like, whoa, these returns are pretty impressive. So that was really the starting point. So I asked my friends and families, like, hey, do you guys want to co-invest and buy a property here because there's no financing? But everyone rejected me. They said, you work in sports technology, sports betting. What do you know about Bali real estate? And it's like, nothing, but it seems like a good opportunity. Let's try. So I went to start that business kind of on my own, trying to find some passive income. And quite quickly, people around me came back to me and said, look, you've got something on the go there. Can we co-invest? Can you give us some tips? What area should we look for? What about management? What about taxes, regulation, all this? So I had a couple of people co-invest just before COVID. Obviously, the business was severely impacted during COVID. But I always had that vision of kind of building a fractional platform. So during COVID, put down on kind of on a low burn. Did spend some time on it, but nothing too major. But then as COVID came to an end, a lot of people were coming back to me and say, hey, I want to kind of start investing again. What opportunities are out there? So that was really the trigger for me to go, look, let's quit my day job. I also didn't really fancy going back to my routine that was pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, I was traveling 80, 90 times a year for work. Had an absolutely amazing time, loved it, but I didn't really fancy going back to the same routine. The company had grown, that I used to work for, had grown quite significantly, a lot more processes in place. So I was like, you know what? It's pretty the right time now. And around that time, my mother also passed away. So that's really a trigger of, look, let me do something else with my life. And I think now is the best time to do this. I was financially quite stable. tourism was coming back, and I was like, okay, let's do this. Let's quit my job and start building Goro, which I resigned on my last day of employment was 31st of January 2022. So it's been over 2 years now as a self-employed person.
Yeah, crazy. So talk us through that, mate. Like, how was that jump? Because for me, it was I was shitting myself, mate. So how was it for you? How did you build the courage up to do it? And what did you set up initially before making that jump?
It all starts mentally first, right? You got to mentally prepare yourself to come to that point of like, am I really willing to take that jump? Living in Singapore, you get paid quite nicely. You have low tax. You have an amazing group of friends that all get paid quite a lot of money. So when it comes to travel, dinners, parties, everyone always has a good time, right? Everyone has a lovely apartment. So to give that up, potentially having to give that up, is quite a big jump in your lifestyle. So I spent a bit of time kind of like going through my finances, thinking about my expenses, what to do, how long could I remain in Singapore. And there was a certain point that on my savings basically, that if that amount would get triggered, or if my balance would fall below, I would go and find a day job again. So then in the end, I was like, look, what's the worst that can happen? I really want to pursue this opportunity. What's the worst that can happen? I quit my job, I try, I lose a bit of money, and I'll go back to corporate life. That was the worst that could happen. I was like, that doesn't sound so bad after all, so let's just do it. I remember calling up my boss. I was shaking. I was very nervous because I really enjoyed working with that company. I really enjoyed working with the team. So having to bring him that news that I was leaving was a bit of a shock to him. He didn't see it coming. But then, never look back.
So since you've been on this journey, right, over the past 2 years, what have been like the main things that you've learned from fundraising to building the team to getting everything together?
It's been a massive learning journey. Stuff that I would get stuck on in the early stages, I now look back on, I'm like, why did I get so stressed over this? That comes from fundraising, hiring, even creating the team. One thing that just jumps to mind is when we were building the product on the back end. So legally structuring the product, we spend a lot of time with lawyers and tax advisors and going back and forth, and they pop your balloon every day. Yeah, you go, nope, this doesn't work. And they're like, look, I've quit my job. I want to make this work. And every time they go, no, can't make it work. And then eventually they go, okay, I think we have something that works. That was quite stressful, but even looking back at that now, it makes me smile. It's just part of the journey. I remember laying on my bed here in Bali. I was staying in Bali back then. It was like, what am I doing with my life, really? Maybe this will never work. A lot of doubts, yeah. It's definitely a roller coaster journey. Every single day, even till today, it still happens. You wake up and you go about your business, and some points it just hits you and you're like, this will never work. Why am I spending so much time on this? But then seconds later, you're also on top of the world again, and you think, look, I've got this sorted. This will be the next big thing in business. But I've been very fortunate to be surrounded by a lot of amazing people, both on a business level and personal level. And I count you as one of them that really helped me through some of these difficult phases that I can call up, or we have a chat, or even if it's just going for a beer and you can just rant about stuff that you've experienced that day. That really helps me. When it comes to some of the advisory stuff, some incredible founders in my network as well that have kind of gone, they're kind of a couple steps ahead of me. So when I give them a call on certain topics, they're like, Rob, don't worry about this. It will all sort itself out in the future. Focus on point A, B instead of the others. So, incredible journey.
Rob, those other founders, right? How did you come across them? How do you find them? How do they help you, etc.?
So in this journey, I had initially met an Indian co-founder in Singapore who wanted to build a fractional investment platform like me. So we had then decided to go after the Indian market because he was Indian. And you obviously need to have local knowledge of the market to really build a product like this. We were very different in personality and we clashed a lot. So that took a lot of energy. Learned a lot from him. We had an amazing time kind of getting to know each other, trying to build the product. We spent time in India, but over time, we couldn't make the product work, and that created tension between the two of us of what would be next in the journey. So in the end, we decided to part ways. And then about a month later, I was on, I also always call it Tinder for co-founders. It's a Y Combinator product where you can create a profile. And it's not about pictures. This is all about your background, what you want to build, what's your, what time zone are you in, how many hours can you commit to this. And I'd come across this Indonesian guy called Andrian, who is now my co-founder. And he wanted to build something similar in the real estate investment space. So I dropped him a message and I said, look, let's jump on a 30-minute call. Let's see if there's any synergy there. And that call lasted 90 minutes, I think. Amazing call. And right off the bat, like really good energy. So I, without sounding too desperate, I said, you look what? I'll jump on a plane. I'll fly to Jakarta, where he was based, or he's based today as well. I'll come and meet you in person, and let's spend some time together and go through a variety of topics and scenarios just to kind of see if we're compatible. And one very important factor that I looked for was, are we also connecting on different levels, and not just business? Can we also talk about our topics? So we both follow F1. Unfortunately, he supports George Russell. I obviously support Max Verstappen being Dutch. So we have these kind of funny jokes that go on. So we can connect in a lot of other topics. So even when business is a bit tough or we're not in the mood, we can talk about other stuff, and it's not just business, which is super important.
No, that's awesome. And how is it being a Dutchie and setting up a business over in Indonesia? How you been finding that? I think there must be some cultural differences. I remember we were talking about this when we moved to Singapore, how the culture difference from working in London is so different to working in Singapore, and just the way people are, the drinks culture, the lunch cultures, which lunch culture is not a thing in the UK, but it is a thing over here in Asia. So has there been anything like that, and how have you kind of dealt with it?
It's been a massive learning curve. It still stresses me out till today. I have a certain way of working, and I kind of expect people to follow that, which is not always possible. And especially when you come into a country like Indonesia that has a very different culture to the Western culture. It's not always easy, but at the same time, I do really appreciate the culture also. And I shouldn't forget that I'm technically a visitor in that country. So I also feel it's my obligation to accept and learn from that culture, but at the same time also try and help them and say, look, this is how we operate in the Western world. Maybe you guys can learn from this. But it's funny that you touch on the lunch culture. Even till today, when it's lunchtime, the entire team in the office will step out. They go for lunch together. I have joined them twice, I think, on lunch. I'm typically the guy that sits at my desk. I order food, I pick it up downstairs, and I just continue working. So the difference I find is the Western culture is more you come into the office, you smash it, try and get your work done as soon as possible. And once you're kind of done for the day, you go home and you go and do other activities. Where I often find, not necessarily in Indonesia, but in the Asian culture, people focus more on hours. They come in early, they spend a lot of hours there, but they kind of take longer breaks. Whatever is more efficient, I'm not sure. I guess I'm just programmed in a certain way to operate. The other challenges are around how we've been brought up, I would say. We are often taught in the Western culture about thinking outside the box. What else can you do for the company or for yourself to succeed? And often people in this part of the world, they would stick to what they've been told. So if they've been told to go left and stick on that path, they'll just stick to it. They won't think beyond. So that does lead to frustration sometimes. But I've also learned to basically take a deep breath when this happens and then see how can you help that individual to think outside the box. And kind of help them grow instead of just getting frustrated and getting annoyed and then potentially leaving the company. Let's find ways that you can help them.
Yeah, I've got a few friends that are, Western founders in Asia, and I feel that they've mentioned quite a few times they struggle to just get that chemistry within the team because everyone's just so different. And not just different from a personality perspective, but as you mentioned, like from an educational perspective, from an experience perspective, from an upbringing perspective. What tools have you used to get everybody to integrate together so everyone feels comfortable expressing whatever they need to express?
Well, especially in Indonesia, when they see a foreigner come into the office, they see me as the big boss, yeah, and they kind of bow for you, and I'm like, come on, guys, I hate this. And it's actually typically during the interview process of any candidate, my co-founder will tell them, who my co-founder is Indonesian, do not treat Rob any different. He's just one of the guys. He's one of the team. He just happens to be the boss or the CEO, but don't treat him differently. And then when they come into the office, they tend to bow and kind of hide, and they swing that right arm. And I tend to send them back out the office. Go back. And my co-founder will start laughing, and he'll be like, told you not to do this. So these are just some basics that are very important to me, that we treat everyone fairly and equally. I also try and share a lot more with them. Typically, they don't really ask questions about your personal life. So they would never ask, how was your weekend? Are you married? Are you single? When are you going on holiday? They would never ask these type of questions. But I try to proactively ask them and share with them what I get up to also give them that idea. I mean, not an idea, to just share with them that I'm also just a normal human being. So you can't expect them to change. So I'm just trying and give them as much as possible to make them feel comfortable around me.
Yep.
But it's still a challenge for sure.
Yeah. Have you been throwing any Bahasa words at them as well to make them feel comfortable, Rob?
Absolutely. Bahasa, bring snacks to the office, take them for lunch. But it's quite interesting. Some of the dynamics depends a bit on the person. Some people are very comfortable sharing personal stuff with my co-founder. And then I always feel a bit like, oh, why are they more comfortable with sharing it with him, and why are they not sharing that with me? Like, what is that barrier? But there's also some people in the team that would share stuff with me and not with my co-founder. So it all comes down to the person as well. But yeah, it does take a bit of time to break down that barrier. But it's part of the challenges. But if you can overcome this as a founder, and you know how to motivate these people and get them to grow, yeah, that'll set you apart from any founder here.
Yeah, no, 100%, mate. And I think that's why your team's grown quite massively now, right? How many people you got now?
Around 35, 40 people, including the operational staff. About 25 of them are based in Jakarta, in the head office there, and the rest is kind of remote or doing operational stuff here in Bali.
Yeah, no, awesome. And like Rob, as I mentioned to you earlier, just before the pod, like even thank you to you, mate, for giving me a nudge and helping me take the leap of faith to set up my business, and the encouragement and the support through that process. You know, for other people that are out there that want to take that jump, you know, what sort of tips would you give them, and what advice would you give them?
Just do it. You probably have heard this a lot, but everything I do, a lot of business decisions till today, and I've been doing this from a very young age, what is the worst that can happen? If you start asking yourself that question, and not just business, yeah, even in personal situations, you'll soon realize that the impact is actually very minor. So in my case, quitting my day job I'll probably lose some savings, but I'll get a huge amount of learnings out of it. And I will have tried at least. Had I not done this, I would have stayed in the corporate world. I would have always been thinking, what if I had done it? And that's also something that we have discussed extensively previously. It's just like, just do it, man. What's the risk there? So that's definitely number one. I've met a lot of founders that are very secretive about their business, and the business idea itself isn't worth much. Even if you think about our business model, fractional property, it's been around for donkey years. You and I could buy a property together. It's technically also fractional investing. So the only thing that we do different is slap a tech layer on top of it. And a lot of people have tried to build this model, but they've not managed to execute properly. So I've always been very vocal about the business idea, because it all comes down to execution. So yeah, don't be too secretive. Ask people for feedback, especially people in your kind of around you. Start asking them for feedback on the business model and see whether they think it may work. Would they be a customer of yours? And then use that to continue building the business.
Yeah, no, mate, I'm actually really glad you said that, actually, because I think one of the regrets that I had when setting up my business is that I was very secretive about it at first. And I probably shouldn't. I was so worried. Oh no, you know, people are going to find out, you know, I'm at risk here, you know, I'm going to lose my job, whatever. But if I actually would have spoken up and voiced what I was going to do, I probably would have got more support. I think people understand that it's life. People have ambitions to do things, and you shouldn't be afraid of expressing that. And people would actually respect you a lot more if you did express it, rather than they find out 3-4 months later once, you know, your, was it competitive period? What's that thing called? Non-compete. Yeah, your non-compete's expired, right? And they find out. You should have just said it before, and they would have given you so much more support through that process. So I think, yeah, people should definitely just get out. You have to get yourself out there, completely.
I've always been very transparent with my former employers and said, look, I have this side hustle in Bali. I'm looking to grow this. And it was always my goal to grow that to a certain point where I would make more from that business than my day job. I think that was always my kind of goal, to say that'd be quite a cool thing. You can say, if your boss then goes, why you're resigning? You go, well, I make more money somewhere else than that I do here, right? But it didn't come to that stage back then. But yeah, just go for it.
No, I remember you always saying that. Actually, that was always the goal. I remember that, mate. I do.
I was just going to say I'm extremely goal orientated. But then I don't really celebrate the wins, which a lot of people tell me you should celebrate the wins. But at the same time, me and my co-founder are very similar in this. It's like, we have worked for this, right? It's like when we buy a property, like, why should we celebrate buying the property? We put a lot of effort into researching the market and researching the property and doing the due diligence, and we then agreed to purchase it, right? So it's just a part of the process. So it's less of a celebration. It's more like, yeah, it was supposed to happen, right? Why are we celebrating the acquisition where we planned for it?
Do you feel that you're not celebrating it because you just got so much going on, just all hands on deck?
Yes, and I've always been like this. I would set myself a goal, and then I'll set myself a reward at the end of it, and then it could be something small that I could buy a certain item, for example, and then you reach that goal and go, okay, let me buy it, and then you go, actually, I don't need this. Let me find another goal. So it's more of my personality, and my co-founder is very similar in this, where we're both, we don't celebrate them per se. Obviously, it makes me proud of what we've achieved, but we don't necessarily go to a club and then go wild, yeah?
Yeah, no, I hear you. But just on you changing your mind or realizing you don't need something, it reminds me of when I think you bought a PlayStation 4 and then sold it afterwards. I think you bought a camera at one point or something, right? And then you sold that as well.
Yeah. Again, it comes back to, like, let's give it a try. What's the worst that can happen? If you can oversee the risk. I mean, even the small stuff of like buying a PlayStation, I sold it a month later for 20% less. I wanted it. I did it. It wasn't for me. I sold it.
Yeah, and we used it. We had fun with it. We still played FIFA. So.
Indeed, but what's the worst that can happen? I lose a bit of money on it. The camera thing was the same. I had a plan around creating these YouTube videos. Didn't really get to that back then, but I tried. So it was a massive learning. So again, what's the worst that can happen? If you can oversee the risk, go for it.
Yeah, no, completely, mate. And just on trying, right? This isn't your first business. You know, I remember you had your t-shirt business in the past as well, right?
Yeah, the tailoring business back in the UK when I was studying there, which I founded in my final year of uni. Very different business. Met some amazing people. A lot of like CEOs, sporting teams, Newcastle United, Scottish rugby team were my customers. So that was truly amazing. But very different business setup. It was much smaller. It was much more of a lifestyle business, and it gave me an amazing lifestyle, especially as a student in my early 20s. Whereas today, the journey or the business we're building, it's a venture-backed company. So the deliverables, the growth, is very different. You can't even compare the two.
Yeah, no, completely. And mate, I feel that over the time period that I've known you, obviously I'm quite goal orientated as well, and there's times when me and you are just so like we want to achieve, we want to get things done. And obviously when you're starting a business, you said there are so many times where you do get a slap in the face, or you do have to just hold your horses and wait to see how things unfold, etc. And that brings a lot of anxiety, brings a lot of stress, brings a lot of worries. How have you dealt with that? Because I've seen you deal with it so well, mate. Like really, really over this period of time, you've really, really been grounded with it. No, seriously, mate. Honestly. So what have you been doing? What's the tools?
I shouldn't really say this, but I've shared this with my co-founder as well, is I've realized, and even I remember when I called you 2 weeks ago, uh, the real recipe is I need a good night out with my mates and just go for a couple of drinks. I don't really drink by myself. In fact, we're end of February, so it's been 2 months this year. I've gone out twice this year, so I've really cut back on the social activities. But I'm an extroverted person, so I need to go out there and kind of release my stress. And I do exercise and all this, but going for a couple of drinks and not get wasted, but just have a bit of fun with your mates. It really works. And I share this with my co-founder, who's completely opposite to me when it comes to alcohol and going out. It's just not his thing. So whenever I reach a point where I'm like, yeah, it's time to go out, he goes, okay, have fun. See you tomorrow. But yeah, just dealing with stress, it's either take a step back, take a deep breath and say, what am I really stuck on here? Why am I getting so stressed? And then it might be something very small that you're like, oh, why is this not happening? But if you then take a step back and go, where am I now compared to a year ago? You've seen phenomenal growth. And then you start to think, oh, this is just a small little hiccup on the journey. And I'm sure you've seen that graph where you talk about growth and people expect it to be one straight line, and it's actually just like lots of ups and downs, right? So it's truly lots of ups and downs. So it's more about zooming out, putting stuff into perspective. Thirdly, or third point is talk about it. Pick up the phone. Talk to your co-founder, talk to the team, like the challenges that you face. And my team sometimes says this to me, like, oh, you must be, do you get, like I had a TV interview recently, live TV interview, and they asked me, do you get nervous for this? I was like, yeah, of course, I'm super nervous. And they're like, you get nervous? So they put you on some pedestal, and I'm like, of course I get nervous. Or I share this sometimes with them because they come to, my team comes to me with questions because I'm their manager, right? So that I'm supposed to answer it, but who do I go to? So again, it's about sharing with the team what you face, sharing with your co-founder, sharing with your investors, and even sharing with your friends and family, and just be very vocal about what you face. And often that makes me feel much better. Some of these people must get fed up with me talking about some of these things, but it helps for me. So.
No, mate, and it helps us as well, because again, for things that we want to do, we can always learn from each other. I think everyone goes on a similar journey, you know, even if it's not setting up businesses, but even in working in a standard job or whatever role it is, you know, they can always take that knowledge on board or just share things that they've seen and heard as well. So I think people do appreciate it, definitely.
I was just going to add on to this. We were at a founders event a couple of weeks ago, and some of these people also shared the same, that in the Western world, especially in Silicon Valley, founders constantly talk about the challenges that they face and how tough it is. But in this culture here in the West, the Asian culture, people don't really want to talk about the tough times. They only want to talk about the good times. So you kind of crop up these feelings and these emotions. So that's why I was initially like this. I think you're supposed to be a man, right? You don't feel sad, you don't feel down, you just keep going. And then over time, fortunately enough, my mother was always very open with me, very transparent, asked me a lot of questions, so that allowed me to share more. So that's also what I'm trying to do on my friends, and say, look, on the outside it might look like we are in fact growing very fast, but it's not without pain, it's not without stress, it's not without challenges. So this is what we're facing. And it's just part of the journey.
Yeah, no, 100%, mate. And I know those nights out are well needed, and we've had multiple of those over the years. How do you find a good balance between that? Because for me personally, right, if I have like 3 pints now, I'm getting old, mate. Like 3 pints, I'm hungover the next day, man. So how do you deal with it? How do you kind of balance that out?
Good question. I've not found the balance yet. I always feel guilty if I go out, or even now I'm in Bali, where I spend most of my time in Jakarta. But when I'm in Bali, I am out and about meeting people, and I sometimes feel bad. I'm like, why am I doing this? I should be in the office working. So I'm still struggling to find that balance. Whether it's exercise, whether it's not working on certain days, it's turning off my phone earlier, turning off on my phone later when I wake up. I've really struggled with this still. because I'm so passionate about what I do. And I think that's the key thing. If you want to build a business, make sure that you're passionate about what you're building. Don't just build for the sake of building. Make sure that it's something you love, that you're going to go through a lot of pain growing this. Financially, it'll be a struggle for most people. So do something that you love, that you're passionate about. But yeah, finding that balance, I've not found it. And a lot of founder friends that I have, they all struggle with the same because they're all so passionate about what they're doing. They want to grow faster. There's more opportunities ahead. There's fundraising. And it seems like the more effort you put in, the more luck you get, the more people come to you wanting to help you. So it's a very tough balance. So yeah, I'm still trying to figure this out. And there's times where I work 2-3 weeks in a row, and then I just realize that I'm mentally exhausted. I kind of test myself. I go to the gym, I run, I'm like, okay, physically I'm in good shape. It must be mentally, and then I'm like, okay, I must have a night out, and then I'll feel better the next day. So it's yeah, I'm still trying to figure this out.
No, I love it, mate. You and me both. It's just, but good. We've got the solution there. No, I think for me, I've been trying to do this 1 beer, 1 water. That helps to a degree, but that only helps when you're sitting at like in a bar or a pub, right? The minute you're on your feet, that method goes out the window, or the minute someone buys a bottle of something, that method goes out the window. So it's quite hard to manage it.
The shots come out.
So, mate, another thing I wanted to talk to you about, something that I've always noticed from you, is that you've always been really good at following your instincts. If something always seems right, you have really good intuition on that, and you'll follow it through. Again, you would always test it out to see what it's like. But every time you've tested out something you've had a good instinct on, it's always worked out for you. So what's the secret, mate? What's your spidey senses?
Good question. In fact, if I bring it back to my current business, it's when we buy these properties, we look at the rental yield. So we prepare these in-depth analysis of these properties, and the numbers may make sense. I still have to build personal conviction on that property, and that takes a bit of time. So my gut feeling takes a bit of time to build that conviction on that property. But what that comes from, I would love to know so I could do more with it. But I even have this with interviews or investors or people that I meet. It's just when you go in and you sense the energy is off, or you just don't click with that person. Like I've been on interviews with people where I interview a candidate, and after 4 or 5 minutes, I just end the call. I'm just like, I'm really sorry. I just don't think this will work. And then you just part ways. And even I've had this with properties. I remember looking at a property here last year for myself here in Bali that I wanted to invest in. And my gut feeling was just telling me it doesn't make sense, but the numbers all made sense. And on hindsight, it was the right decision. The project is massively delayed. It's about 7-8 months behind schedule. So it was actually a good decision to pass on it. But at that point, I was like, what is happening? Or even just before COVID started, we were looking to invest a lot of money into a couple of projects here in Bali. I was also in the process of looking to resign back then. My brother was going to move to Bali to help me operate these businesses. And for some reason, we were working on 4 projects at that point with different owners. And all of a sudden, one by one fell through. And I was like, what's happening, man? We put in all the effort. I've built my personal conviction. My gut feeling is telling me to go ahead. But then everything fell through. And next thing, COVID happens. So there's these kind of things that seem to happen for a reason that I can't really describe. That I guess they kind of protect me somehow. What it is and how it works, I don't know. But yeah, my gut feel. I tend to listen to my gut feeling quite a lot, more than sometimes business advice. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. And does that also lead you to your creative thinking? Because I know mate, for the whole period of time that I've known you, you've always been thinking forward, thinking about the next thing, or thinking about how you can get the best out of a situation, not only just in the business front, but on a personal front as well. Like you always aim to be 2 steps ahead and like want to completely exhaust the situation. Where's that come from, and how do you do that?
I don't know where that comes from necessarily, because my dad worked for a large corporate. My mother was an anesthetist, so they don't necessarily come from an entrepreneurial background. But I've had this from a very young age where I would spot opportunities. I remember my dad used to work in the UK, so we would fly with him from the Netherlands to the UK on trips, and I would pick up clothes there, and I cut off the for sale tag and I resell it in the Netherlands at full price, and I make 50-60% margin. It was small stuff, but when you're 14, 15 years old and you can make $20, $30, that's a lot of money, right? So it's always been there from a very young age where I just spot opportunities where I think I can do stuff better, more efficient, or it could be more done differently to make more money. You must have heard a million ideas coming from me, like, I want to do this now, I want to do this. So I do lose interest quite quickly. So there's been a lot of ideas where I spend a lot of time on it, and then I just lose interest overnight. Whereas with Goro, or the property investing, the fractional investing, that's been part of my my passion for the last 7-8 years. And I remember during COVID we made no money, but we're losing money every single month, but I put in the same amount of effort on this because I knew, I guess my gut feeling was telling me that there's something bigger waiting for this, and I guess that's what I'm working on today. So I was listening to your gut feeling on this. But where this entrepreneurial mindset comes from, I don't know. I think you're born with this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that we also mutually know in Singapore that have amazing careers that want to do something different, but they don't have the balls, I guess, to resign and to lose a bit of money to try and pursue their dreams. I think it's more of a personality trait that you're born with than anything else. This is not something you can just learn.
No, mate, it's definitely getting out of that comfort zone for sure, which I think you're always quite used to and enjoy. I wouldn't say enjoy, I'm not sure. Do you enjoy change?
Yes and no. I think it's more about adapting. And also one thing that my co-founder and I are very similar on this, it's if a new idea comes up, instead of just outright rejecting it and thinking this doesn't work, we always go, can we just try this? What's the easiest way to try this? And people often think, oh no, you've got to build a lot of tech. It will cost time and money and time to do this. But often you can do a simple spreadsheet exercise. You call up a few people. You can do an initial small sample size. So we are always like, let's try. And it comes back to the point I made earlier. What's the worst that can happen? Let's dedicate a couple hours to this. Let's try it. And if it works, great, then we'll continue. If it doesn't work, we've learned from it. And we know that it doesn't work. So it's never that question of what if we had tried a certain strategy. It's more about doing than anything else. And I'm definitely not the smartest guy out there, yeah? I know a lot of much smarter guys in terms of education, perhaps thought process, but they don't have that courage, I guess, to give up everything and try and build something for themselves. And you hear this a lot, right, where they're very successful entrepreneurs, they always say they're not the smartest. They're like your C-class, C-level students, and they hire A-class talent around them.
So what's your story then, Rob? Like, was there a trigger in your life or something that happened during your teen years or whatever that caused you to be the way that you are now?
I always had that ambition to be my own boss. And I've always had that from a very young age. I wanted to be an entrepreneur, build a large, successful company, employ a lot of people. That was always part of my dreams. People were dreaming about being a fireman or a police officer or an astronaut. I was always thinking I want to be an entrepreneur. That's always been one of my dreams. And then starting my first business when I was 19, till I sold it when I was 24, I then went back to being employed, and that was a massive learning curve. Going from being extremely flexible, I could do whatever I want, to then working for someone who had certain expectations of how the company should be run and how the employees should behave. And that led to a lot of clashes, yeah, where we just couldn't see eye to eye. And even in my last job, same thing. I'm just kind of entrepreneurial guy. I want to think of opportunities outside the box, and often in a corporate you do not get these opportunities. They need you to do something very specific, and I'm always like, I can do this better, or I want to do this, and they're like, no, stick to your box. And then I lose interest, and that will probably make me think of other opportunities that I can actually put in my energy and my passion. But where this comes from, this drive of wanting to be self-employed, I don't know, I think it's just been, maybe it comes back to the previous point, it's not something you can learn necessarily. It's just something you're either just born with this or you're not. And to be honest, we need more people that are employed than entrepreneurs, right? Otherwise, everyone would be an entrepreneur and no one will be able to hire. So you actually need this kind of imbalance where there's a very small piece of the population that builds companies and a large part of the population works for a company.
No, completely, mate. No, I completely resonate with you on all of the things you mentioned. Definitely the working for somebody, especially a large organization, you're definitely constricted to what that business wants, what that department wants, what that team wants. It just keeps getting more and more narrow to what you're actually able to do. So definitely with you on that one, man.
But I can see the appetite that people like it, right? That you get a lot of benefits, generally good compensation, bonuses, commission, promotions, insurance, name what else you can get, right? So I understand that it gives a lot of security to people to operate in that space. But it's simply not for me. It's just I've given up a lot of stability, but then I've not looked back once and said I wish I'd not done this.
Yeah, and even with me, mate, like again, not having insurance, and not having a regular income, and all of these things that you take for granted. You know, there are times again where I've woken up and I'm like thinking, shit, fuck, what have I done? What's going on? How am I going to get out of this situation? But then again, you just have to remind yourself of the bigger picture, right?
One thing that I probably miss sometimes of being employed, besides the usual paycheck, it's I have no one to report to. I have a sense of, I need to obviously report to my investors, but that's more like an update of what we're doing with their money. But there is no weekly check-in with my boss, right, or my manager that I say, this week I've achieved X, Y, Z, I need help with this, I'm doing this next, right? So you need to be a self-starter for sure to exceed in this space. But obviously there's days where you wake up and you're like, where do I start? What am I going to do next?
Let's talk about that actually, right? Because for me, I'm very classic. I've got a notepad next to my laptop and I will make a list and I'll go through like that. And then my Outlook calendar is very important as well, just to spread my day out. How about you? How do you structure your day? And what tools do you use?
At the beginning, it was complete chaos. I would just do whatever would come up. Because like I mentioned at the beginning, it was like last year, it was more like a small project. We'd raised a bit of money. We hired a few people. Really trying to validate if there's a demand for this. So you have to be very agile and kind of adapt super quickly. So there was not much structure. But now that the team has grown to about, 35 people, I have to be a lot more structured. So there's a lot more meetings in the calendar now, where previously it was very ad hoc. Also, there was no team meetings needed at that point because we were 3-4 people in an office. So if you wanted to discuss something, you would just turn around your chairs and discuss. Where now we're at a point where we need to schedule these type of meetings. So I'm quite traditional when it comes to this as well. Yeah, it's just schedule stuff on the calendar, and I've got a notepad and I just write them down. I'm not very systematic per se. I don't necessarily tick them off, and I can only leave when it's all done. But I just make a note of it to make sure that I get it done.
Yeah, no, I love the feeling of just crossing it out. And that's ridiculous. It does give me a dopamine rush. Just doing that crossing, fuck it, I've done it. I've done something. I know it's so small, man, but it gives me so much satisfaction.
Where you have just have to adapt. Just accept it, learn from it, and move on. And you also have to pick your battles, right? Do you want to start arguing over, I want to use X or is it Y? Just kind of go, pick your battles and just move on.
But also budget as well, right? Well, you actually have budget to take on as well is quite important.
Yeah. As a startup founder, it's all about being frugal, minimizing cost. There's a lot of funny pictures that my co-founder and I have of going into apartments on a Saturday morning, carrying pillows and bed sheets so we could take pictures of these properties and list them. Even till today, sometimes our CRM stops working. It's like Sputnik technology, but it's cheap and it does the job. So it's building something that can scale, but at the same time be very frugal, because things can get out of hand very quickly. For the longest time, we were using WhatsApp Business, which would get blocked every 3-4 days, and they'll be out of the running for a day, calling WhatsApp and say, can you please unblock our number? And then they will unblock it. And then once that happens a couple of times, you go, okay, I think we've now reached the limit. We should probably look at alternatives. But it's always kind of stretching the boundaries and ask for discounts, or if a certain tech platform stops giving you credits, I remember I was just speaking to a unicorn founder a couple of weeks ago where they had stopped giving us credits because the test period had expired. And then you just have to ask them the cheeky question, go, hey, how are you? Can you give me some more credit? That hurts your pride sometimes, but yeah, it's just part of the journey.
Yeah, I guess everyone wants to help as well, man. Everyone's been in the same boat, so they all know, which is always good. But Rob, before we close off, mate, I always want to ask all my guests that come onto the pod, if you had a message to the world or to other people that are out there, what would that message be based on the journey that you've had and the life that you've lived?
I think I've already kind of mentioned it. It's just go out there, follow your dreams, and just ask that very simple question to yourself: what's the worst that can happen? And go out to your friends and family, ask them for advice, and don't shy away from sharing. Not just the positives, also talk about the challenges, and that will help you really progress in life. And like you actually mentioned, the topic, finding that healthy work-life balance is actually very important, but I've not managed to find the recipe yet.
No, you and me both, mate, but we will do. And again, one thing that I've kind of realized from this pod is that we do need to celebrate the wins, mate. I know both of us haven't really seen much of each other over the past year or so, but let's definitely get something booked in the diary to celebrate some wins for sure.
I remember when we signed our first VC term sheet, I messaged my co-founder saying, "Oh, I just signed the term sheet," and his response was the emoji with the thumbs up.
Well done, mate. That's what the first. Oh, brilliant.
So it's funny, these kind of things that you're like, wow, hey, mate, this is going to change the business. And these investors have made a massive difference to our business. But yeah, so it's just part of the journey where, like, look, we had the term sheet for a few days, we had thought about it, but yeah, it's just these things stick in your memory sometimes.
No, again, and that's different cultures, man, and different people, which is that's why it's so important to understand what everyone's like, so we can work our best to integrate.
Absolutely.
Alrighty, mate. Well, look, let's get some celebrations booked in, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me on.
Cheers, dude.